What if everything you thought about happiness was backward? The ancient Stoics, philosophers like Seneca and Epictetus, didn't just question pleasure, they feared it. Seneca once warned, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Imagine that, a school of thought that saw pleasure not as a reward, but as a trap. Why would thinkers who devoted their lives to wisdom view joy as something dangerous? It's a startling idea in a world that chases comfort and gratification at every turn. But the Stoics weren't just being contrarian. They understood something profound about human nature, that pleasure, when unchecked, doesn't elevate us, it weakens us. Think about the last time you indulged in something purely for comfort. Maybe it was scrolling endlessly, overeating, or avoiding a difficult task. At first, it feels harmless, even deserved. But over time, that same pleasure can quietly erode your discipline, your drive, even your sense of purpose. The Stoics saw this pattern centuries ago. They believed that pain, as counterintuitive as it sounds, was the sharper teacher. Struggle forces clarity, discomfort builds resilience, while pleasure whispers, "Stay where you are, pain demands, grow or perish." This isn't about glorifying suffering, it's about recognizing that the easy path rarely leads to strength. So why does this ancient debate matter today? Because we live in an age of unprecedented comfort, where distractions are endless and effort is optional. The Stoics' warning feels almost prophetic. What happens when a society prioritizes pleasure over growth, when we confuse convenience for happiness? This video isn't just a history lesson, it's a mirror. We'll explore how the fear of pleasure shaped Stoic philosophy, why pain was their unlikely ally, and how these ideas can help us navigate a world that's constantly tempting us to take the easier way out. The stakes are higher than you might think, because the real danger isn't discomfort, it's forgetting how to live without it. Seneca put it bluntly, "What fortune has made yours is not your own." For the Stoics, pleasure wasn't just fleeting. It was a magician's trick, distracting us from what truly lasts. Picture a rich meal. The first bite is exquisite, but by the 10th, you're numb to the flavor, left only with heaviness. That's the illusion they warned about. Pleasure promises fulfillment but delivers diminishing returns, conditioning us to chase the next quick fix rather than the steady work of building character. Modern life is full of these traps. Streaming services keep us clicking next episode long after we've stopped enjoying the show. Social media offers endless scrolls of empty validation. Even productivity tools can become crutches, buying another self-help book instead of applying what we've already learned. The Stoics would call this soft slavery, where comfort becomes the chains. But here's the twist: they weren't against joy itself. They celebrated the deep satisfaction of a life well lived, what they called eudaimonia, the difference. Virtue grows the more you give it away. Unlike pleasure, which fades with repetition, integrity compounds. Standing by your values in a difficult conversation, choosing effort over convenience, finding meaning in hardship, these aren't just actions. They're investments in a self that no external comfort can replicate. So ask yourself, what pleasures in your life are like sugar, intense but hollow? And which ones are like sunlight, sustaining you long after the moment passes? The answer might reveal where you're trading growth for gratification. Because the Stoics knew something we often forget. True freedom isn't the ability to indulge. It's the power to choose what lasts. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome at its height, wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." At first glance, it sounds like a paradox. How could pain possibly propel us forward? but the Stoics saw adversity as the whetstone that sharpens the mind. When life strips away comfort, it forces us to confront what we're truly made of. Picture a tree in a storm. The wind doesn't weaken it. Over time, those relentless gusts condition its roots to grip the earth tighter. That's the Stoic view of hardship, not as an enemy, but as the most honest teacher we'll ever have. Consider a modern gym. The burn in your muscles during a workout isn't just fatigue, it's the signal that you're growing stronger. The same principle applies to mental resilience. A career setback, a failed project, even a difficult conversation, these aren't just obstacles. They're invitations to develop patience, creativity, or humility. The Stoics would argue that without resistance, we never discover our capacity to adapt. Comfort might cushion us, but it's discomfort that shapes us. There's a revealing experiment in psychology where two groups of plants were grown, one in a controlled greenhouse, the other exposed to unpredictable winds. Contrary to expectations, the plants that faced turbulence developed deeper root systems. They didn't just survive, they thrived. Human growth follows the same pattern. The moments that force us to dig deeper, a health scare, a financial strain, a personal loss, often become the turning points where we uncover strengths we never knew we had. Think back to a time when you faced something painful. Maybe it was a rejection that pushed you to refine your skills, or a period of loneliness that taught you self-reliance. What did that experience reveal about your resilience? The Stoics didn't just endure hardship, they learned to mine it for wisdom. As Marcus Aurelius put it, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This isn't about romanticizing suffering. It's about recognizing that while pleasure often leaves us passive, pain demands engagement. A ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. The Stoics understood that a life without challenges is like a sword never tested. It might look perfect, but you'll never know if it can hold its edge. So the next time you face a struggle, ask yourself, what is this here to teach me? Because the greatest growth rarely comes from what's easy. It comes from what asks more of you. Epictetus, the former slave turned Stoic teacher, had a radical way of framing our relationship to pleasure. He said, "Freedom is secured not by the fulfillment of desires, but by the removal of desire." At first, that sounds almost inhuman. Why would we strip away the very things that make life enjoyable? But his insight cuts deeper. It's not about rejecting joy. It's about recognizing how easily pleasure can become a cage. Every time we attach our happiness to something external, whether it's a like on social media, a new purchase, or even the perfect cup of coffee, we hand over a piece of our freedom. The more we depend on these fleeting comforts, the more power they have to disappoint us. Take social media as a modern example. That rush of dopamine when a post goes viral feels incredible, but what happens when the engagement slows down? We chase the next hit, tweaking our lives for validation, measuring our worth in notifications. The Stoics would call this a textbook case of misplaced attachment. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to externals. In other words, the moment we tie our self-worth to things outside our control, applause, possessions, even other people's opinions, we set ourselves up for endless frustration. Consumerism thrives on this very weakness. Advertisements don't just sell products, they sell the idea that happiness lives in the next purchase. But like a mirage, the satisfaction fades the moment we grasp it. The newest phone becomes outdated, the trendy wardrobe feels stale, and suddenly, we're left with clutter, both physical and emotional. The Stoics saw this cycle centuries ago. Their solution wasn't austerity for its own sake, but a deliberate practice of detachment. By regularly stepping away from comforts through fasting, cold showers, or voluntary discomfort, they train themselves to find contentment without dependency. This isn't about swearing off pleasure entirely. It's about asking a crucial question: who's in charge here? Are you enjoying that glass of wine, or is the wine enjoying you? Can you scroll through social media without it hijacking your mood? The difference is subtle but profound. Attachment turns pleasures into silent rulers, while detachment keeps them in their proper place as occasional guests, not permanent residents. So here's a challenge. For the next 24 hours, notice what you reach for out of habit rather than genuine need. That extra snack when you're not hungry, the reflexive phone check, the online shopping cart filled with things you'll barely use. These aren't just small choices, they're mirrors showing us where we've handed over the reins, because the real test of freedom isn't what we can acquire, it's what we can walk away from. The Stoics had a word for the state of calm they prized above all else: apatheia. It doesn't mean apathy, as we might assume today. Instead, it's the art of freeing yourself from destructive passions, those turbulent emotions that hijack our judgment. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, described it as standing firm like a rock against the crashing waves of desire and fear. Picture a lake on a windless day, perfectly still, reflecting the sky without distortion. That's the equilibrium they sought, not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. Now, imagine tossing a pebble into that lake. The ripples distort the reflection, just as pleasure, when chased recklessly, disturbs our inner balance. The Stoics observed that the highs of indulgence often lead to corresponding lows. The thrill of a shopping spree gives way to buyer's remorse. The buzz of praise fades into anxiety over the next achievement. It's a cycle as old as human nature, yet we keep falling for the illusion that the next peak will last. Modern mindfulness practices echo this ancient wisdom. Meditation isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about observing them without being swept away. Think of a therapist's office where patients learn to sit with discomfort rather than numb it with distractions. The Stoics would approve. Their version of apatheia wasn't cold detachment. It was the ability to experience joy without clinging to it, or grief without drowning in it. Here's a test. Recall the last time something thrilled you: a promotion, a romantic gesture, a personal victory. How long did that glow last? Now think of a disappointment, a rejection, a failure. How quickly did it consume your thoughts? The Stoics argued that both extremes reveal the same vulnerability: our tendency to let external events dictate our inner state. This isn't about becoming emotionless robots. It's about recognizing that every high and low is temporary, like weather passing through. The real skill lies in steadying yourself so neither euphoria nor despair can throw you off course. So next time you feel a surge of excitement or a pang of frustration, pause. Ask yourself, is this serving me or am I serving it? Because true freedom isn't in feeling nothing, it's in choosing what deserves your energy. Seneca observed something unsettling about human nature in his letters: no matter how much pleasure we acquire, it never quite satisfies. He wrote, "It is not that we have so little time, but that we lose so much." This is the essence of the hedonic treadmill, that relentless cycle where each new pleasure loses its luster, forcing us to chase the next one just to feel the same fleeting high. Consider how a child's excitement over a new toy fades within days, or how the thrill of a promotion soon gives way to wanting the next raise. The pattern is universal, yet we keep mistaking the chase for the destination. Materialism offers a clear example. That smartphone you waited months to buy, within weeks, it's just another device. The luxury car you dreamed of, soon you notice the newer models on the road. Even fame follows this law. Celebrities often describe the emptiness that follows the adrenaline of applause. The Stoics saw this coming 2,000 years ago. Their counterintuitive solution wasn't to acquire more, but to desire less. Real contentment, they argued, comes not from filling an endless void, but from recognizing that the void itself is an illusion. Think of it like eating salty chips. The first one tastes incredible, but by the 10th, you're just eating out of habit, chasing a satisfaction that never returns. Pleasure operates the same way. It dazzles us initially, then demands ever greater doses to feel anything at all. The treadmill speeds up, but we stay in place. Now contrast this with Stoic contentment. Imagine two people at a concert, one frantically recording every moment to post online, the other fully immersed in the music. Who's truly experiencing the event? The Stoics would say the second person, because they're free from the hunger for external validation. Their joy isn't borrowed from future likes or memories, it's complete in the moment. This raises a provocative question. What if satisfaction isn't about getting more, but about needing less? The billionaire and the monk might drink the same tea, but one savors it while the other barely notices. The difference isn't in the cup, it's in the attention, the gratitude, the absence of craving for something else. So here's a challenge. Pick one pleasure in your life, your morning coffee, a favorite song, even a comfortable chair. Next time you experience it, pause. Are you truly enjoying it or just consuming it out of habit? The answer might reveal whether you're feeding your happiness or just feeding the treadmill. Because the Stoics weren't wrong, the fewer things we need to feel whole, the richer we actually are. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher often overshadowed by his more famous students, put it plainly: how can a person become good if they aren't willing to sweat? That question cuts to the heart of Stoic discipline, not as punishment but as liberation. Think of it like building a fire. Pleasure is the kindling that flares up fast and burns out quick, while discipline is the slow-burning log that keeps you warm through the night. The Stoics didn't see hard work as something to endure. They saw it as the path to reclaiming agency over a life that pleasure constantly tries to hijack. Consider how modern distractions operate. You sit down to work, but within minutes, your phone buzzes with a notification. One quick glance turns into 20 minutes of mindless scrolling. What feels like a harmless break is actually a Trojan horse. Each tiny indulgence trains your brain to resist sustained effort. Procrastination isn't just laziness. It's pleasure's sneaky way of keeping you dependent on quick hits of dopamine instead of the deeper satisfaction of meaningful work. The ancient Stoics faced different temptations: luxury, fame, excess, but the underlying battle was the same: the pull of what feels good now versus what builds something lasting. Here's where discipline becomes revolutionary. Every time you choose the harder path, waking up early to exercise instead of hitting snooze, writing that report before binge watching the next episode, you're not just checking a box. You're rewiring your relationship with pleasure itself. Musonius Rufus practiced this daily. He slept on the ground not because he had to, but because he wanted to prove to himself that comfort didn't own him. That's the hidden power of discipline. It transforms "I can't resist" into "I choose not to." So let's make this practical. Pick one small pleasure you rely on, maybe that afternoon sugary snack, or the habit of checking emails first thing in the morning. For the next week, replace it with a disciplined alternative. Swap the candy for a walk around the block, or dedicate the first 30 minutes of your day to your most important task without distractions. The goal isn't to punish yourself. It's to discover what happens when you starve a distraction and feed your focus. Because every time you exercise discipline, you're voting for the person you want to become over the impulses that keep you where you are. The Stoics knew something we often forget. Freedom isn't the absence of constraints. It's the ability to impose your own. When you master discipline, pleasure stops being a trap and starts being a choice, one you make consciously, not compulsively. And that changes everything. Epictetus offered a startling prescription for happiness. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. At first glance, this seems counter to everything modern society teaches us. We're bombarded with messages telling us that more is better, more gadgets, more followers, more experiences plastered across social media. But the Stoics spotted the trap centuries ago. Desire isn't just a longing for things, it's a factory of perpetual dissatisfaction. Every unchecked want plants the seeds of future frustration because the goalpost keeps moving. You finally get the car you craved, only to notice the neighbor's newer model. You achieve a career milestone, then immediately fixate on the next rung of the ladder. It's like drinking seawater to quench thirst. The more you consume, the more dehydrated you become. Consumer culture thrives on this endless cycle. Advertising doesn't just sell products, it sells the idea that you're incomplete without them. That coffee maker isn't merely a machine, it's framed as the key to mornings filled with joy and purpose. The latest smartphone promises not just functionality, but social acceptance and even identity. The Stoics would call this desire inflation, where our wants grow faster than our ability to fulfill them. Epictetus warned, no person is free who is not master of themselves. When your happiness depends on external acquisitions, you're handing over the reins to forces beyond your control. Here's the paradox: limiting desires doesn't shrink your life, it expands your freedom. Think of a traveler burdened by heavy luggage. Every new souvenir adds weight, slowing them down. Now imagine dropping that baggage. Suddenly, movement becomes effortless. That's the Stoic approach to desire. It's not about deprivation, it's about unshackling yourself from cravings that turn into obligations. Let's make this tangible. Grab a piece of paper and draw 2 columns. In the first, list desires that feel urgent right now. Maybe a designer jacket, a promotion, or more Instagram likes. In the second, ask, what would happen if I never attained this? Often, you'll find that the fear of missing out is louder than the actual value of the thing itself. The jacket won't transform your confidence. The promotion might just swap one set of stresses for another. The likes, they'll vanish into the digital ether by tomorrow. This exercise reveals a liberating truth. Many of our desires are ghosts. They haunt us, but they can't actually touch us. The Stoics weren't advocating for a joyless existence. They were urging us to distinguish between wants that enrich and those that enslave. So tonight, as you scroll through curated feeds or walk past gleaming store windows, pause. Ask yourself, is this desire serving me or am I serving it? Because the fewer things you need to feel whole, the more unshakable your peace becomes. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." This cuts to the heart of Stoic philosophy, that virtue isn't just admirable, it's the only true measure of a life well lived. While pleasure comes and goes, integrity leaves a permanent mark. Think of it like building a house. Pleasure is the paint that fades over time, but virtue is the foundation that holds everything together. When the Stoics called virtue the highest good, they meant it literally, not as a poetic ideal, but as the irreducible core of human excellence. Consider 2 people facing the same ethical dilemma. One chooses the easy path, pocketing extra change from a cashier's mistake because no one will know. The other corrects the error, even when it costs them. At first glance, the first person seems to win. They gain a little extra money with 0 consequences. But the Stoics would argue the second person walks away richer. Why? Because every act of integrity deposits something into an account that never depletes: your self-respect. Pleasure gives temporary highs, but virtue compounds interest over a lifetime. Modern life tests this daily. Imagine discovering your company is cutting corners on safety to boost profits. Speaking up could risk your job, but staying silent risks others' well-being. The Stoic response, Marcus Aurelius again. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Simple, but not easy, that's the point. Virtue shines brightest when it demands something from us, when we choose principle over convenience. History remembers this. We admire figures like Rosa Parks or whistleblowers, not because their choices brought them comfort, but because they upheld what was right despite the cost. This raises a question worth sitting with. What virtues would you defend at personal expense? Is it honesty when a lie would spare embarrassment? Courage when staying silent is safer? The Stoics believed these weren't just moral exercises, they were the weights that strengthened character. Like a musician practicing scales, each small ethical choice trains us for the symphonies of harder decisions. So here's an invitation. Tonight, reflect on one virtue you want to deepen. Maybe it's patience with your family, accountability at work, or generosity when no one's watching. Then tomorrow, find one concrete way to live it, not grandly, but consistently, because the Stoics were right about this. Pleasure's whispers fade, but virtue's echo lasts forever. Seneca practiced something radical for a wealthy man in ancient Rome. He regularly gave up his comforts on purpose. He would sleep on a hard floor, wear plain clothing, even go days eating only stale bread, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His reasoning was brilliant in its simplicity. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, he wrote, saying to yourself the while, is this the condition that I feared? This wasn't self-punishment. It was training. By voluntarily stepping into discomfort, Seneca proved to himself that happiness wasn't tied to external comforts, and in doing so, he robbed hardship of its power to disturb him. Modern science backs this ancient practice. Intermittent fasting isn't just about physical health. Studies show it strengthens mental discipline and emotional regulation. Digital detoxes work the same way. When we resist the pull of constant notifications, we're not just saving time, we're reminding ourselves that we control our attention, not the other way around. Think of it like a muscle. Every time you say no to a small pleasure, you strengthen your ability to handle life's inevitable denials. The job rejection, the missed opportunity, the unexpected setback. Here's how this plays out in everyday life. Imagine two colleagues facing a cancelled flight. One, accustomed to constant comfort, spirals into frustration, complaining loudly and refreshing the airline app obsessively. The other, who regularly practices small acts of denial, whether skipping dessert or taking cold showers, sighs, then calmly books a train ticket. Both experience the same inconvenience, but only one has trained their mind to adapt. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of hardships. By occasionally choosing discomfort voluntarily, we inoculate ourselves against involuntary suffering. This week, try your own version of Seneca's experiment. Pick one comfort you rely on: your morning latte, the snooze button, that nightly Netflix binge, and intentionally go without it for 24 hours. Notice what happens. At first, there's restlessness, maybe even irritation. But if you sit with that discomfort instead of rushing to soothe it, something shifts. You'll discover a quiet confidence that says, I am more than my cravings. That's the hidden gift of voluntary denial. Not austerity for its own sake, but the profound realization that you're richer than you thought, because what you truly need was inside you all along. Epictetus saw something dangerous lurking beneath pleasure's surface, its uncanny ability to feed the ego while starving true confidence. He warned, it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what they think they already know. That's the trap. Pleasure often comes with a silent narrative of superiority. That rush of pride when you outperform a colleague, the smug satisfaction of owning the latest gadget before your friends, even the fleeting high of a viral post, each one whispers, "You're special." But here's the problem the Stoics spotted. An inflated ego is brittle. Like a balloon stretched too thin, it's one pinprick away from collapse. Social media turns this dynamic into a perfect storm. Every like and share acts as a tiny dose of validation, training us to equate attention with worth. But what happens when the engagement slows, when someone else's post gets more traction? That same ego that swelled with praise now deflates with envy or insecurity. The Stoics called this the slavery of opinion, when your self-esteem becomes hostage to external approval. Epictetus practiced radical humility not because he lacked skill, but because he knew arrogance blinds us to growth. Imagine two artists. One obsessively checks their follower count, the other focuses solely on improving their craft. Which one evolves? This isn't just about social media. Think of workplace dynamics. The colleague who basks in praise but crumbles at constructive feedback reveals the fragility of ego-driven success. Or consider parenting, the difference between wanting your child to excel for their sake versus needing their achievements to validate your worth. Pleasure tied to ego is like building a house on sand. It feels solid until the tide rolls in. Here's a revealing exercise. For one day, track every time you feel a spark of pride or insecurity tied to something external, a compliment, a comparison, even a silent judgment. Notice how quickly those highs and lows alternate. The Stoics would say this roller coaster isn't inevitable. It's what happens when we mistake ego strokes for real strength. True confidence doesn't come from being better than others. It comes from no longer needing to be. So tonight, try this counterintuitive practice. Seek out one small opportunity to be wrong, to admit ignorance, or to celebrate someone else's win without comparing. It might feel uncomfortable at first, like flexing a long dormant muscle, but that discomfort is the sound of your ego shrinking and your resilience growing. Because humility isn't weakness. It's the ultimate liberation from pleasure's most insidious lie, that you need to be exceptional to matter. Marcus Aurelius watched the sun set over the Danube during a military campaign and wrote, "All that exists is the seed of what will emerge from it." In that moment, he wasn't just observing nature, he was practicing Stoic mindfulness, recognizing that even the most radiant joys are fleeting by design. Think of the last time you stood on a beach at dusk, the sky painted in colors no camera could capture. That's the paradox of beauty. Its power comes from the certainty that it won't last. The Stoics didn't just accept this truth, they revered it. They understood that impermanence isn't a flaw in life's design. It's the very thing that makes moments sacred. Modern culture tells us the opposite. We're taught to chase endless summers, to extend vacations with Instagram throwbacks, to replay celebrations in highlight reels, to treat happiness like a battery we can keep at full charge. But this creates a cruel irony. The more we try to possess joy, the more it slips through our fingers. Like clutching water in your palms, the tighter you grip, the faster it drains away. The Stoics offered a radical alternative. Don't grasp witness. That birthday party isn't diminished because it ends. Its meaning lies in the fact that it was there at all. Consider how we experience music. A song isn't beautiful because it loops forever on repeat. It moves us precisely because the notes fade. The silence between tracks makes the melody matter. Ancient Rome's grandest feasts embraced this wisdom. Hosts would display a skull among the delicacies, not to morbidize the event, but to heighten appreciation. The Stoics called this memento mori, remembering that life's brevity isn't a threat, but a lens that brings its sweetness into focus. Here's where modern psychology aligns with ancient insight. Studies on negative visualization show that imagining the loss of something, your health, your relationships, even your morning coffee ritual, sharps your gratitude for its presence. It's not pessimism, it's precision. The vacation you reminisce about for years wasn't perfect because it lasted forever. It became precious because it was a temporary gift. So try this tonight. Pick one ordinary pleasure: your child's laughter, the smell of rain, even the warmth of your bed. Now close your eyes and pretend it's gone. When you reopen them, notice how the mundane suddenly feels miraculous. That's Stoic joy, not in clutching the sunset, but in knowing you were there to see it. Because the deepest happiness isn't found in resisting life's transience, it's found in surrendering to it. Seneca saw it clearly. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. What he's describing isn't just procrastination, it's the slow creep of comfort that convinces us we have infinite time. Pleasure whispers that there's always tomorrow to start that project, mend that relationship, or chase that dream. But here's the uncomfortable truth the Stoics understood: comfort isn't neutral. Every day we spend nestled in familiar routines is a day we're not stretching toward something greater. Think of a hot bath, soothing at first, but stay too long and the water grows tepid, then cold. That's what unchecked comfort does to ambition. Modern life has perfected this stagnation. Streaming services deliver endless content without the effort of choosing. Food arrives with a tap, eliminating even the minor adventure of trying a new restaurant. Gym apps promise fitness without leaving home. These conveniences aren't inherently bad, but they create what psychologists call the comfort paradox. The easier life becomes, the harder it is to leave its embrace. Seneca warned of men who spend their lives accumulating riches only to end up the slaves of their acquisitions. Today, we might say we're enslaved by convenience, trading growth for frictionless living. Consider how this plays out in careers. That promotion you've been eyeing requires difficult conversations and new responsibilities. The side hustle idea you've nurtured demands late nights and uncertainty. Comfort says, wait until you're more ready, but readiness never comes. The Stoics recognized this pattern centuries ago. They saw pleasure not just as momentary enjoyment, but as a systemic threat to potential. Like a ship anchored in harbor, safety comes at the cost of never reaching new shores. Here's the challenge: look at your daily routines. Where have you traded growth for ease? Maybe it's the podcast you keep meaning to launch but never record, the language app neglected after the first 3 lessons, the gym membership that feels like enough even if you rarely go. These aren't just unfinished goals, they're symptoms of comfort's quiet takeover. The Stoics would prescribe something radical: voluntary discomfort. Skip the elevator and take the stairs. Turn off autoplay and sit with boredom. Have that difficult conversation you've been avoiding, because here's what ancient wisdom and modern science agree on: growth happens at the edge of discomfort. Muscle fibers tear before they strengthen. Neurons form new connections when challenged. The version of you that's content with comfort isn't bad, it's just incomplete. As Seneca put it, fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. The question isn't whether life will push you out of your comfort zone, but whether you'll step out before you're forced. So tonight, identify one area where ease has dulled your edge. Then do the very thing that feels just slightly beyond ready. That's where ambition gets its second wind. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, offered a deceptively simple principle: follow the path where reason leads, not where passion drags. At first glance, this might sound like a call to suppress desire entirely, but the Stoic ideal was far more nuanced. They weren't advocating for a joyless existence, nor were they endorsing unchecked indulgence. The real wisdom lay in what they called the middle path, a life where pleasures aren't forbidden, but where they're never allowed to steer the ship. Imagine a musician tuning a string. Tighten it too much and it snaps, leave it too slack and it won't produce sound. That's the balance the Stoics sought, a harmony between denial and excess, where neither extreme dictates your choices. Take food as a modern example. A strict diet that cuts out all treats can feel virtuous at first, but it often backfires, leading to binges when willpower wanes. On the other hand, mindless indulgence leaves us sluggish and regretful. The Stoic approach: enjoy the occasional slice of cake, savor it fully without guilt, but never let dessert become the reason you eat dinner. This principle extends far beyond the dining table. Consider work-life balance. Burning out for a promotion might bring temporary accolades, while chronic laziness erodes self-respect. The middle path: work diligently, then disconnect completely, not because you've earned rest, but because rest is part of a life well lived. The brilliance of moderation lies in its flexibility. It's not about rigid rules, it's about recognizing when enough is enough. The Stoics observed how easily pleasure mutates into dependency, how that nightly glass of wine can become 2, then 3, until one day you realize it's not a choice anymore, but a need. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Habits form when small pleasures create neural pathways that demand repetition. The middle path interrupts that cycle. It's the pause between craving and action, the moment you ask, is this serving me or am I serving it? Here's where Stoicism gets practical. Pick one area of your life, screen time, spending, even gossip, and track it for a week. Notice when consumption tips from enjoyment into compulsion. That threshold is different for everyone, but the warning signs are universal. A dwindling sense of satisfaction, a quiet urgency to repeat the behavior, or defensiveness when questioned. The middle path isn't about arbitrary limits, it's about reclaiming agency. Zeno's insight was timeless: extremes are easy. Deprivation and excess both require less thought than mindful balance. But the rewards of the middle path are profound. It's the difference between controlling your pleasures and being controlled by them. So tonight, as you reach for that extra episode or second helping, pause. Ask not just can I, but should I? Because true freedom isn't found in the absence of desire, it's found in the power to meet it with clear eyes. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming one of history's greatest philosophers, put it bluntly: difficulties show what men are. There's a reason pain cuts through life's noise like nothing else. When comfort fades and hardship strikes, our pretenses fall away, revealing what we truly value. Picture a storm at sea. The waves don't create the strength of the ship, they reveal it. That's pain's clarifying power. It strips away the trivial and forces us to confront the bedrock of our character. Take Socrates' final moments. Condemned to death by Athenian authorities, he didn't flee or beg for mercy. Instead, he used his last hours to discuss immortality with friends, sipping hemlock as calmly as if it were evening wine. His student Plato recorded how Socrates even paused to return a stray chicken to its owner on the way to his execution. That's not indifference, it's the ultimate demonstration of priorities. Faced with the ultimate pain, Socrates showed what mattered most: living and dying in alignment with his principles. The Stoics revered this moment because it proved a radical truth: how we endure defines us far more than how we enjoy. Modern life offers subtler but equally revealing tests. That migraine that forces you to cancel plans. What do you miss most? The project failure that keeps you awake. What lesson won't let you go? Even physical pain holds a mirror to our values. An athlete pushing through a marathon's wall isn't just tolerating discomfort, they're declaring that the finish line matters more than temporary relief. Pain doesn't distort our priorities, it sharpens them into focus. Here's the challenge: recall a moment when pain, physical, emotional, or professional, clarified something for you. Maybe it was a breakup that revealed unhealthy patterns, or a financial scare that exposed misplaced priorities. The Stoics would argue these aren't just hardships to survive, they're diagnostics, showing us where we've been living out of alignment. Comfort lets us pretend, pain tells the truth. So next time you face adversity, ask not just "how do I escape this?" but "what is this exposing?" Because the moments that feel like endings often contain the seeds of beginnings, if we're brave enough to look. As Epictetus knew, the forge doesn't ruin the metal, it reveals the sword within. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a reminder to himself in his private journal that cut straight to the modern dilemma. If you seek tranquility, do less. Not nothing less. He wasn't advocating laziness but ruthless prioritization. The irony: even an emperor surrounded by wars and political intrigue understood what we often forget. Pleasure's greatest danger isn't indulgence but distraction. It's not the chocolate cake that derails your diet, it's the dozen tiny, harmless bites throughout the day that add up without you noticing. The Stoics saw pleasure as a master of disguise, slipping into our lives not as outright decadence, but as endless micro-distractions that fragment our attention like shattered glass. Think about your phone right now. That little dopamine hit from clearing notifications feels productive, but what's really happening? You're not relaxing. You're scattering your focus across a dozen trivial tasks instead of directing it toward what matters. Research from Stanford reveals something startling. Chronic multitaskers aren't just worse at filtering irrelevant information. Their brains actually rewire to crave constant novelty. Pleasure in this form isn't about gratification anymore. It's an addiction to interruption, training us to mistake busyness for progress. The Stoics predicted this 2,000 years ago when they warned against the chase of shiny things. Here's where it gets personal. That podcast playing while you work, the quick social media break that steals 30 minutes, even the comforting ritual of checking emails first thing in the morning, these aren't just habits. They're silent thieves of purpose. Ancient Rome had its own version. Aristocrats would hire servants to whisper reminders like, "Remember you must die," during feasts. Morbid, maybe, but effective. It forced them to ask, is this pleasure serving my deeper intentions or just filling time? Try this experiment today. Carry a notepad and tally every time you switch tasks to something easier or more instantly gratifying. Not to judge yourself, just to observe. You might discover, as I did, that the real obstacle to your goals isn't lack of time. It's the gravitational pull of comfortable distractions masquerading as necessities. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: focus isn't something you lose, it's something you surrender, one tiny pleasure at a time. The remedy isn't monastic deprivation. It's conscious selection. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness," he wasn't describing drudgery. He was prescribing liberation, the kind that comes when you stop letting pleasure dictate your attention and start choosing where your energy goes. So tonight, ask yourself, what's one distraction I've been pretending is harmless? Because sometimes the most radical act of self-respect isn't adding more to your life, it's daring to subtract what's secretly subtracting from you. Seneca once observed that fire doesn't destroy gold, it reveals it. The same principle applies to human character. Adversity isn't just something to endure, it's the crucible that shows us what we're made of. Think of a blacksmith shaping a blade. The hammer strikes aren't punishment, they're what transform raw metal into something sharp and unbreakable. The Stoics didn't see suffering as random or meaningless. They saw it as the ultimate test, one that separates fleeting emotions from enduring strength. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies on post-traumatic growth reveal something remarkable. People who face significant hardships, serious illness, loss, even failure, often emerge with deeper resilience, clearer priorities, and a heightened appreciation for life. It's not that the pain itself is beneficial, but how we respond to it. Consider the athlete who tears a ligament, only to return stronger after months of grueling rehab. Or the entrepreneur whose failed venture becomes the foundation for their eventual success. These aren't just comebacks, they're proof that pressure doesn't crush us, it crystallizes us. Here's the twist: the Stoics believed you don't have to wait for life to test you. You can volunteer. Seneca practiced poverty despite his wealth, not because he enjoyed deprivation, but to prove to himself that he could thrive without luxury. Modern equivalents might include fasting to appreciate food, taking cold showers to build discipline, or even deleting social media apps to reclaim focus. These aren't acts of self-punishment, they're rehearsals for resilience, ensuring that when real adversity strikes, you're not meeting it for the first time. So let's make this personal. Recall a moment when life tested you, maybe a job loss, a betrayal, or a dream that fell apart. At the time, it likely felt like an ending. But looking back, what did it reveal about your capacity to adapt, your hidden reserves of patience or courage? The Stoics would argue that those hardships weren't obstacles to your story, they were the forge that shaped it. Because gold doesn't fear the fire, it trusts the process, and so can you. Epictetus offered a simple but revolutionary idea. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. What he's describing isn't apathy, it's the art of redirecting your energy from outcomes to actions. Picture an archer drawing their bow. They can control their stance, their aim, even their breath. But once the arrow leaves the string, wind, gravity, plain luck, none of it's in their hands. The Stoics would say the archer's job isn't to guarantee a hit, but to loose the best shot possible. That's the essence of detachment, pouring yourself into what you can influence, then releasing your grip on the rest. Modern life bombards us with the opposite mindset. Job interviews become nightmares not because we didn't prepare, but because we're haunted by the what-ifs of rejection. First dates turn into performances, not conversations, when we fixate on whether they'll call back. Even creative work suffers. How many brilliant ideas never leave the sketchbook because the fear of criticism outweighs the joy of creation? The Stoics saw this trap clearly. When we chain our self-worth to results, we hand over our peace to forces we'll never control. Here's where detachment becomes liberating. Think of a writer submitting their manuscript. They can polish every sentence, research the market, choose the perfect agent. But whether it becomes a bestseller, that's not theirs to decide. The Stoic approach doesn't mean shrugging indifferently at failure. It means separating effort from outcomes so rejection can't poison your pride in the work itself. History's most resilient innovators embody this. Thomas Edison didn't celebrate 10,000 failures while inventing the light bulb. He reframed them as discoveries of what didn't work. Each attempt was a complete act, regardless of the result. Try this reframe today. Pick one area where you've been clinging to results, maybe a job application, a fitness goal, even a text left on read. Now ask yourself, what parts of this are truly mine to control? Did I show up fully? Did I act with integrity? If so, the rest isn't your burden to carry. Like the archer, your power ends where the arrow leaves your hand. The wind will do what it will, but a well-aimed effort, that's always worth taking. Epictetus drew a line in the sand that still matters today. Some things are within our power while others are not. At first glance, it seems obvious, of course, we can't control the weather or traffic. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most of what we chase for pleasure lies squarely in that second category. The perfect date going well, the boss praising our work, even the fleeting high of a viral post. These aren't just desires. They're hostages to fortune. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, and it reveals pleasure's cruelest irony. The more we crave external validation, the more power we surrender to the unpredictable. Modern life magnifies this dilemma. Think of the job candidate rehearsing answers for an interview they might never get. The dieter obsessing over a number on a scale that fluctuates daily. Even social media follows this script. We can craft the wittiest caption, but whether it resonates depends on algorithms and moods we'll never influence. Psychologists call this the locus of control problem. When we tie happiness to outcomes outside our reach, we're setting up camp in anxiety's backyard. Here's the twist Epictetus saw coming. What feels like pursuit is often just paralysis in disguise. Approval seeking isn't really about connection, it's about outsourcing self-worth. The gourmet meal isn't ruined by a bad review, our enjoyment is. The Stoics proposed a radical alternative: shift your focus inward, not because externals don't matter, but because your response to them matters more. A musician can't force an audience to applaud, but they can choose to play with integrity. A writer can't guarantee sales, but they can honor their craft. Try this exercise tonight. Grab paper and draw 2 columns. In the first, list pleasures you chase that depend entirely on others' promotions, compliments, even that text reply you're waiting for. In the second, note what's genuinely yours: effort, perspective, the decision to try again. The difference between these columns isn't just philosophical, it's the gap between anxiety and agency. Because here's what the Stoics knew that we often forget: no one can take away what you never gave them permission to give. Seneca described true joy as a good flow of life, and not a fleeting high, but a steady current running beneath your days. That's the heart of eudaimonia, the Stoic ideal often mistranslated as happiness. It's closer to flourishing, like a tree thriving not because of occasional rainstorms, but thanks to deep roots tapping into unseen groundwater. While pleasure shouts, eudaimonia whispers. It's the quiet satisfaction of a nurse changing bandages at midnight, the pride in resisting gossip when it would have been easy to join in, even the warmth of an honest conversation where no one performs for applause. These moments don't sparkle like champagne bubbles, but they leave something lasting: the unshakable knowledge that you're living in alignment with your best self. Consider 2 people at a charity gala. One basks in the spotlight, savoring compliments on their generosity. The other slips away early to deliver meals to the homeless unseen. Both experience pleasure, but only one touches eudaimonia. The Stoics weren't naive. They knew external rewards feel good, but they also saw how easily praise becomes a drug, demanding ever larger doses to feel the same effect. Virtue works in reverse. The more you give it away, the more it fills you. That's why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be." B1. Modern life offers endless substitutes for real joy. Social media conflates visibility with virtue, as if posting about kindness replaces practicing it. Corporations sell self-care as bubble baths and scented candles while ignoring the deeper care of setting boundaries or keeping promises. The Stoics would call these imitations, like craving salt water when you're thirsty. They might satisfy momentarily but leave you emptier than before. Here's how to spot the difference. Fleeting pleasure often demands an audience. Eudaimonia needs only your own recognition. Think of the last time you did something difficult but right, returning lost money, apologizing sincerely, choosing patience when frustration boiled over. That quiet pride, that stoic joy, it doesn't rely on circumstances because it's not something you get, it's something you become. Try this today. Notice one moment when you're tempted to take the easier, less virtuous path. Maybe it's cutting corners on a project no one will check, or laughing at a cruel joke to fit in. Pause, ask, which choice will I respect myself for tomorrow? That split second of awareness is where eudaimonia begins, not in grand gestures, but in the daily decision to let your character outshine your cravings. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who turned down imperial luxury to live like a philosopher, saw excess for what it really is, not just indulgence, but slow corrosion. He warned that luxury doesn't merely pamper the body, it softens the soul. Picture a sword left in its sheath too long. At first, the scabbard protects the blade, but over time, moisture seeps in, and what was once sharp begins to rust. That's the danger of unchecked pleasure. It doesn't just distract us from hardship, it erodes our capacity to face it at all. Modern life offers endless variations on this decay. Think of burnout, that soul-deep exhaustion so many of us know. On the surface, it seems like the opposite of excess. You're working too hard, pushing too far, right? But dig deeper and you'll find pleasure's fingerprints all over it. The late-night streaming binges that steal sleep, the third coffee you didn't need but craved. Even the compulsive hustle culture that glorifies overwork as a status symbol. These aren't signs of discipline, they're symptoms of a deeper imbalance where momentary comforts become the fuel for a life that's unsustainable. The Stoics saw this coming. Musonius lived in a Rome where aristocrats gorged themselves at banquets only to vomit and start again. Today, we binge watch, binge shop, binge scroll, different feast, same emptiness. Here's the unsettling truth: excess doesn't always look like decadence. Sometimes it wears the mask of necessity, that extra hour scrolling in bed because you deserve to unwind. The closet full of clothes you never wear because it was on sale. The calendar packed with commitments you didn't want but couldn't refuse. Pleasure's corruption isn't just about overindulging, it's about losing the ability to say enough. So let's make this practical. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 3 columns. In the first, list comforts you consider harmless, maybe that nightly dessert, the constant background noise of podcasts, or the automatic yes to every social invitation. In the second, note what these habits displace: sleep, quiet reflection, moments of genuine connection. The third column is the hardest. Ask yourself, what would happen if I have this? Not eliminated, just halved, because the Stoics weren't extremists. They didn't shun all pleasure, they shunned slavery to it. There's a reason Musonius slept on the ground even when he owned a bed. It wasn't about punishment, it was about remembering that comfort is a tool, not a master. The fire that warms you can also burn your house down. The question isn't whether pleasure has a place in your life, but whether you still have a place in your life beyond pleasure. Epictetus, who knew the sting of slavery before becoming philosophy's uncompromising teacher, put it bluntly: if you want to be strong, live like a wrestler in training. He wasn't talking about literal athletes, though the metaphor holds. Wrestlers don't wait for the championship to test their limits. They seek out sparring partners tougher than their opponents. That's the Stoic secret to resilience. Voluntary discomfort isn't self-punishment. It's strategic preparation for a world that won't always cushion your falls. Take something as simple as a cold shower. At first glance, it's just a jolt to the system, unpleasant but harmless. But beneath the surface, something profound happens. That moment when icy water hits your skin and every instinct screams to retreat. That's the exact crossroads where resilience is built. The choice to stay under the stream isn't about proving toughness. It's about rewiring your relationship with discomfort itself. Modern science confirms what the Stoics intuited. Brief exposure to controlled stress, whether cold therapy, fasting, or even challenging workouts, triggers anti-inflammatory responses, boosts mood-regulating neurotransmitters, and literally thickens the brain's prefrontal cortex. In other words, what feels like endurance training for the body is actually strength training for the mind. History's most resilient figures practiced this deliberately. Theodore Roosevelt, known for his boundless energy, spent childhood winters sleeping with windows open to harden himself. Buddhist monks meditate in freezing Himalayan caves not to suffer, but to master the art of observing discomfort without being ruled by it. Even Silicon Valley CEOs have adopted discomfort challenges, giving up screens for weekends or taking meetings standing in snowbanks, the common thread. They're all rehearsing for life's inevitable hardships, ensuring that when real storms come, they've already weathered smaller ones. Here's where modern comfort culture gets it backward. We treat difficulty like a glitch to be fixed: headaches with pills, boredom with scrolling, loneliness with notifications. But the Stoics recognize that removing all friction doesn't create happiness, it creates fragility. Like a tree grown in a greenhouse sheltered from wind, we might look thriving until the first real gust snaps us. So here's your challenge: pick one voluntary discomfort this week. It could be as small as leaving your phone behind during walks, or as visceral as turning the shower to cold for the final 30 seconds. Notice what happens when the initial resistance fades. That space between "I can't" and "I did," that's where your inner wrestler trains, because resilience isn't something you're born with, it's something you cultivate, one deliberate chill at a time. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his private journal, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." There's something startling about that image: pain not as a wound to be feared, but as a chisel uncovering what's already there. Think of a sculptor working with marble. The hammer strikes might seem destructive, but each blow isn't taking something away. It's revealing the form hidden beneath the surface. That's pain's paradoxical gift. It doesn't create strength, it exposes the strength you forgot you had. Consider a moment in your own life when hardship forced you to dig deeper than you thought possible. Maybe it was a job loss that pushed you to reinvent yourself, a heartbreak that taught you resilience, or even a physical injury that revealed untapped patience. At the time, it likely felt like an assault on your stability, but looking back, what did it show you about your capacity to endure? The Stoics believed these weren't random misfortunes. They were mirrors reflecting back the parts of ourselves we rarely see in times of ease. Here's a personal example. Years ago, I tore a ligament during a marathon, an injury that forced me into months of grueling rehab. At first, all I felt was frustration at the setback. But slowly, something shifted. Those daily exercises, the incremental progress, even the setbacks, they became a masterclass in persistence. The pain wasn't just a symptom, it was the teacher. By the end, I hadn't just recovered physically, I discovered a tenacity I didn't know I possessed. That's the mirror at work. It doesn't distort reality. It strips away the illusions of limitation. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies on post-traumatic growth reveal that people who face significant adversity often develop deeper empathy, stronger relationships, and a renewed sense of purpose. It's not that suffering itself is beneficial, it's that suffering shatters the superficial layers we mistake for our whole selves. Like ice breaking to reveal flowing water beneath, pain cracks open the rigid personas we construct in comfortable times. So here's the invitation. Next time you face pain, whether physical, emotional, or professional, pause. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Try asking, "What is this revealing about me?" The difference is subtle but profound. One question casts you as a victim of circumstance. The other positions you as a student of your own resilience. Because the Stoics were right, the mirror doesn't lie. It only shows what was there all along, waiting to be acknowledged, and that changes everything. Pleasure has a way of dressing up its promises in glitter and gold, only to leave us holding fool's gold when the moment passes. Seneca saw right through this illusion when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." That line cuts deep because it reveals pleasure's dirty little secret. It's not the experience itself that disappoints, but the weight of expectations we pile onto it. Think about those picture-perfect vacations you've scrolled through online. The filtered sunset shots, the laughing couples holding cocktails, the pristine hotel rooms. Reality rarely matches the brochure. The sand gets in your shoes, the flight gets delayed, and suddenly that Instagram fantasy feels more like a chore you paid too much for. Romantic relationships follow the same script. Early dates sparkle with chemistry and possibility. Every text message feels electric, every glance loaded with meaning. But fast forward 6 months, and you're arguing about whose turn it is to take out the trash. This isn't cynicism, it's human nature. Pleasure thrives on novelty, but life demands maintenance. The Stoics understood this disconnect better than anyone. They noticed how we chase the first sip of wine but ignore the hangover, how we obsess over the thrill of new purchases but grow numb to them within weeks. Consider the phenomenon of destination addiction. That restless belief that happiness lies just over the horizon, in the next promotion, the next relationship, the next city. Social media amplifies this endlessly, showing us curated highlight reels while editing out the mundane struggles. A friend posts grinning photos from their dream job, but they don't mention the Sunday night dread. An influencer shares their perfect morning routine, cropping out the chaos of kids and spilled coffee just outside the frame. We compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's premiere, and pleasure becomes not just fleeting but fraudulent. Here's where Seneca's wisdom becomes practical. Recall a time when something you desperately wanted, a job, a possession, even a person, finally became yours. Remember that initial rush, then how quickly it faded into normalcy. That shift isn't failure, it's data. Pleasure operates on a curve of diminishing returns, conditioning us to chase the next high rather than appreciate what we have. The vacation ends, the new car smell fades. The promotion brings different stresses, not because life is cruel, but because pleasure was never designed to sustain us long term. So try this reframe. Next time you catch yourself fantasizing about some future happiness, pause. Ask yourself 2 questions. First, what story am I telling myself about this experience? Second, how might reality differ? That space between expectation and truth is where disappointment grows, but it's also where wisdom begins, because pleasure doesn't lie about being enjoyable. It just forgets to mention it won't last. Epictetus, the philosopher who walked away from slavery to teach freedom, left us with a razor-sharp truth. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. At first glance, this sounds like deprivation, but look closer. Renunciation isn't about losing what you love. It's about reclaiming what owns you. Picture a hot air balloon. Every non-essential you jettison isn't just weight lost, it's altitude gained. Suddenly, the view expands, the horizon clears, and you realize you weren't meant to crawl under all that baggage in the first place. Modern minimalism trends tap into this same insight. That viral closet purge isn't just about empty hangers. It's about the mental space that opens when you stop deciding between 30 nearly identical black shirts. Digital minimalism follows suit. Deleting apps isn't sacrifice. It's the euphoria of realizing your attention was never theirs to take. Even the tiny house movement mirrors Stoic principles. Living smaller isn't about shrinking your life, but enlarging your freedom. The common thread, detachment, reveals how much of what we call need is really just habit in disguise. Here's the twist Epictetus saw coming. Renunciation isn't a one-time event. It's a daily practice of spotting new chains, that extra streaming service you never use but keep, just in case, the drawer full of expired coupons. The emotional energy spent tracking someone else's social media highlights. These aren't just trivial clutter, they're micro leaks draining your focus, your time, your peace. The Stoics didn't advocate empty shelves for aesthetics, they championed empty space for the soul. So let's make this tangible. Tonight, open one drawer, physical or metaphorical. Maybe it's your overflowing inbox, the gym membership you haven't used in months, or even that grudge you've been reheating like leftover resentment. Pick one non-essential and renounce it with intention, not as loss but as liberation. Notice what happens when you stop tending what wasn't feeding you anyway. Because here's the secret the minimalists and monks both know. Every no to clutter is a yes to something far more vital, yourself. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, described wisdom as a smooth flow of life, not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of its tides. Imagine a seasoned sailor navigating stormy seas. They don't curse the waves or beg for calm, they adjust the sails. That's the Stoic sage's balance, an equilibrium where joy doesn't intoxicate and grief doesn't paralyze. Consider how we handle modern disappointments. A cancelled flight sends one person into a social media rant, while another quietly rebooks and opens a book. Both feel frustration, but only one lets it steer their behavior. The sage isn't emotionless, they're emotionally agile. Today's culture often pushes us toward extremes. Social media rewards outrage and euphoria in equal measure, turning emotions into performance art. Reality TV amplifies conflict for entertainment, while self-help gurus preach relentless positivity, as if sadness were a glitch to be fixed. The Stoics would find this baffling. To them, emotions weren't enemies or badges of authenticity. They were weather patterns passing through the mind. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this during wars and plagues, writing, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." His clarity didn't come from suppressing fear. It came from refusing to let fear dictate his choices. The sage's balance reveals itself in small moments. Picture a parent staying calm when a child spills paint, not because they don't care, but because they recognize anger won't unspill the jar. Or a leader addressing a team mistake with focus on solutions rather than blame. These aren't superhuman feats, they're the result of treating emotions as signals, not commands. Modern neuroscience backs this ancient insight. When we label our feelings, "I notice I'm feeling defensive," we activate the prefrontal cortex, dialing down the amygdala's panic alarms. The Stoics were pioneers of cognitive distancing, the skill of observing emotions without being hijacked by them. Here's the challenge for one day: model the sage's balance. When irritation flares in traffic, acknowledge it without honking. When praise lands, savor it without clinging. Like a gardener tending plants, don't uproot your emotions, just prune what overgrows. Because balance isn't about feeling less, it's about living more fully in every current without drowning in any. Seneca's morning ritual might surprise you. Before dawn, he'd light a lamp, unroll a scroll of parchment, and confront himself with piercing questions. What bad habit will I curb today? What virtue will I strengthen? This wasn't diary writing, it was philosophical surgery, a deliberate excavation of his own flaws and aspirations. Modern Stoics have adapted this practice into what's now called Stoic journaling, but the core remains unchanged, a daily audit of where you're surrendering to pleasure's whispers and where you're choosing growth. Try this tonight. Instead of scrolling before bed, ask Seneca's 2 questions. The first shines a light on your weakest point, maybe snapping at loved ones when stressed or procrastinating on that creative project. The second, it plants a flag where you want to go. Over time, these small reckonings compound into something extraordinary, a life lived with intention, not inertia. Gratitude practices often get watered down into cliches, think forced, thankful lists, that feel more performative than transformative, but the Stoic approach cuts deeper. Marcus Aurelius didn't just list blessings, he contemplated their fleeting nature. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love, he wrote, immediately adding, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This dual lens, appreciating gifts while acknowledging their temporariness, creates a gratitude that's vibrant, not vapid. Modern research confirms this. People who pair gratitude with mortality awareness experience deeper well-being than those practicing generic thankfulness. Tonight, as you jot down 3 things you're grateful for, add 1 sentence about why you'd miss them if they vanished. That edge of loss sharpens appreciation into something unshakable. The real power of Stoicism lies not in grand gestures, but in micro habits that reroute your relationship with pleasure. Start with one they called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Each morning, visualize your day going wrong. The train delays, the co-worker's snark, the spoiled dinner plans. This sounds morbid, but here's the magic. When disruptions actually happen, they feel like expected guests rather than home invaders. A tech CEO I know uses this before board meetings. He imagines his proposals getting shredded, then walks in calm and prepared. Another friend visualizes her toddler's tantrums during breakfast, transforming frustration into amused detachment when they inevitably come. The goal isn't pessimism, it's psychological inoculation. Your challenge, pick 1 Stoic habit this week, not all 3. Maybe it's journaling like Seneca, gratitude with an edge like Marcus, or rehearsing setbacks each morning. But here's the catch, attach it to an existing routine. Morning coffee becomes journaling time. Toothbrushing doubles as gratitude rehearsal. The commute turns into premeditatio practice. These habit stacks bypass resistance by piggybacking on autopilot behaviors, and when you inevitably slip up, the Stoics would applaud. Failure isn't the opposite of progress, it's the raw material. As Epictetus put it, no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Your fig tree won't grow overnight, but each small, deliberate practice is a seed planted in the soil of who you'll become. The Stoics didn't fear pleasure itself, they feared how easily it masquerades as happiness, whispering lies about what truly lasts. Pain, for all its sharpness, never pretends to be anything but honest. It strips away illusions, leaving only what's real, our capacity to endure, to adapt, to grow. That's why Marcus Aurelius could write, "The obstacle is the way," while lounging in imperial palaces. He knew luxury might soften the body, but only hardship tempers the soul. Think of it like this: pleasure is the glittering surface of a lake, dazzling but shallow. Pain is the current beneath, unseen, but what carries you forward. Detachment was their armor against pleasure's seductions, not indifference, but the clarity to enjoy a sunset without needing to own it, to savor a meal without demanding seconds. Modern life bombards us with the opposite message that more is always better, that comfort equals success. Yet the Stoics saw through this centuries ago. A billionaire and a beggar both sleep under the same stars, but only one knows they're enough. Resilience was their compass in chaos. Like a tree bending in a storm, they understood that flexibility isn't weakness, it's the secret to standing tall when the winds change. Every voluntary cold shower, every fast undertaken, every silent walk without a phone, these weren't punishments. They were rehearsals for life's inevitable trials. And virtue, that was their North Star. Not the performative goodness of social media likes, but the quiet integrity of doing what's right when no one's watching. Imagine two friends. One shares every charitable act online. The other anonymously pays a stranger's medical bill. Both help, but only one embodies the Stoic ideal where goodness isn't a transaction for praise, but a reflection of character. Marcus Aurelius left us a final clue. Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break. It stands firm, and the waters are stilled around it. That's the Stoic legacy, not a rejection of joy, but the wisdom to know which pleasures are worthy of you. So tonight, as you scroll past curated happiness or crave some fleeting comfort, ask yourself, is this serving the person I want to become? The answer might surprise you. Share your thoughts below. When has pleasure led you astray, or when has pain revealed your strength? And if this resonated, join us for more Stoic insights. Because the greatest journey isn't out there, it's the one that begins when you look within.